I was watching Ariel's show from Monday. I caught it late, and he had Trevor Whitman on. Trevor Whitman is a very famed and long-standing mixed martial arts coach. To give you guys a frame of reference, he's also the coach of world champion Rose Namajunas. So Trevor was on, and he was talking about, he made a couple of points. One, he said that, Rose was in the bus that Conor attacked with the dolly when, 3 people were ultimately hospitalized from glass going into them. And Rose almost canceled her fight, her rematch with Joanna. She was very upset about it. And then you haven't heard a whole lot since, and so Trevor kind of brought it full circle and brought it back around, and he said that Rose is still traumatized to the point that she doesn't even leave her house. I thought that was an interesting comment. I didn't know, because it speaks to something larger, which is there's a lot of lawsuits that are going to be going against Conor McGregor. I imagine Borg has one. I imagine Chiesa has one. I imagine Rose has one. I don't know that all for sure, but I even heard somewhere, as I'm sure you guys did, I'll just remind you, but there was even a UFC employee that was going to take some kind of legal action for the same reason. They were just traumatized. They're like PTSD from this. And I realized that there was athletes that had actual injuries, but it was a really big deal. We just haven't heard much about it. I really can't speculate. I don't even hear things quietly. Even though it hasn't made the media, I'm not even hearing things quietly. Though I suspect that there is legal action that's taking place. I couldn't prove as much as that. I would just have to assume when 3 people go to the hospital with injuries created from a crime, particularly when that crime is created by a millionaire, they're going to have some lawyers grab them and start taking some suits are going to be filed. So we'll see where all of that goes. But Trevor brought up another point, and he said he did not think that the footage of Conor attacking the bus should be used in the promotion of the fight, which is an interesting and fair point. And I don't know that I want to share or even form an opinion. I don't know that I have an opinion, so I don't know that I want to influence you guys as much as just have the discussion. So let's back the tape up a little bit, because timelines are always important. And the first time that Dana ever got called out for showing footage of a bad action in conjunction with promoting a fight was John Jones versus Daniel Cormier. Dave Schaller was in between, if you guys remember that. A lot of you thought it was John Anik in between. Dave Schaller was in between. They're at a press conference somewhere. I think it was in Vegas. And then they get into a street fight. And there's Schaller left to try to break this thing up. The commission got involved. There was sanctions against each of them. There was fines against each of them. And I believe there was community service against each of them. And whether that fact is getting blurred in from somebody else's scenario with them or not isn't totally relevant to the fact that it was a bad action, and it was ruled a bad action, and it was punishable, which is how we know it was a bad action, and it was used in the promotion of the fight. And Dana just told the truth. No PR, no spin, no whatsoever. He goes, look, this is a very personal fight. That was a real and raw moment. It's part of the story of the fight, for better or worse. We captured it, and when trying to tell the story of the fight, we're going to use the footage that we have. That was very appropriate, and it also made for a lot of fun. That was the part that we didn't want to admit, even as we attempted to come at this from the moral high ground and the high-handed position that an inappropriate act caught on video should not be used for commercial monetary gain. But it was a really important part of the story. I mean, here we are years later. You still remember that. You still remember the press conference when Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis got into it. It was just a really important part of that story and time. So I accepted Dana's answer, and I enjoyed the footage, and I enjoyed the build-up. And here you are with a little bit different situation, because this isn't just a commission that comes in and sits you down and slaps you on the wrist. This was, there was criminal action taken. So you are talking about something a little bit more significant. So now you're talking about using footage of a crime to promote a commercial enterprise. Now, where I'm going with this, and the dimension that I'm even on, is far more sophisticated than I believe we ever need to look into it. There was something there that was compelling and captivating, and you put it out. You had the footage, you put out the footage. I don't know of any other television that does that differently. I really don't. I don't know of any news. I'll just use the news by example, but that's because they have examples from A to Z, from jaywalking to the darkest of crimes that are caught on tape, and they will use that for what we call a tease. meaning they will tease to say, stick around after the break and see the rest of this video. I use the news by example because it's something you guys can relate to that happens on a daily basis. I don't know of any commercial enterprise that goes on television that does not try to use the most captivating and compelling footage that they can. But for some reason, Dana ends up in the hot seat when he tries to do this with fights, which I'm not sure why Dana gets selectively put into a different class than worldwide news. I'm not sure. When baseball has a fight, and fighting is not allowed in baseball, not only do they replay it over and over again, but all of the sports shows replay it over and over again. Why? To get ratings. And why do they want ratings? To get advertisers. And why do they want advertisers? To get money. They're just able to hide a little bit better by a few more layers the fact of their promotion in exchange for the dollars than Dana, who is to go right to the promotion, right to revenue. So Dana seems to get judged in a little bit of a different class. And I don't know if that's right. I will tell you my own promoter, Scott Coker, ended up in the middle of something on complete accident, which is he's putting on a show in Ireland. And again, it comes back to Conor McGregor, but Conor shows up, all hell breaks loose. I can't remember what pissed him off. But he behaves a fool and gets wrong with it and jumps the ring and hits officials and does a number of really bad actions. But now you've got it on video. What do you want Coker to do? Not use it? Come on. That's what happens when you produce television and you capture video. They're two separate entities, is what I'm offering for you. The fact that Conor, I'm not going against Coach Whitman here. I am not going against Coach Whitman at all, and he comes from a different perspective that is a higher layer and level than I'm able to speak to you on because his athlete is Rose, and she was affected by it. So I am not against him whatsoever. I'm just sharing with you. If you are passing judgments and you are influenced by anybody in this small space and small bubble of mixed martial arts who are saying that it is wrong and inappropriate to use the footage of Conor's bad actions in conjunction with the promotion of a fight to build revenue and to build excitement, if you're saying that that's wrong, first off, I would offer to you that everybody else does that. And the old saying of, well, he did it, and so therefore it's okay. No. I'm not that guy. I'm just saying if you're choosing to take issue with this, it has to be wide and broad spread and far-reaching because this is the way that television is done when you have a compelling moment. That is a very fair and accurate point by me. And I do feel that Dana White gets singled out in this, and I'm not totally sure why. The other thing that I would offer you is they are separate in that having the video and the footage, the UFC then turning that video and footage over to the prosecutors at the time that they were trying to make a decision on whether to move forward with Conor McGregor was appropriate, and it's exactly what they did. In a separate conversation, they are now telling the story of a fight and what led us here. And it is very appropriate to then use that as well to tell the story, because it is a tremendous part of the story. And I would ask you guys to consider this. If I have not won you over, and all I'm trying to win, I'm not trying to convince you whether it was right or wrong. What I'm trying to convince you of is here was the thought process, and it is very consistent with other television producers. But if I have not won you over, then please consider this. Okay? Consider that you are armed with the information that Conor McGregor broke into a building, used a weapon known as a metal dolly, which is the first thing that he saw to get his hands on, threw that into a bus that Khabib Nurmagomedov was occupying, that he tried to get in a gang-style street justice fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Consider that that happened. Consider that that was public. Consider that that was a bad action. Consider that that went to the DA's office. Consider that was turned over to the courts. And consider that the courts brought Conor McGregor in handcuffs and ultimately reached some kind of a conclusion to all of this. Imagine that you were armed with that information. And then you find out that Dana White does not use the video. I promise you, as sure as night follows day, you would come out with the narrative that Dana did not use the video because it was a bad action by his prized pony, by his prized fighter, and he hid that video to protect the image of his organization and of his star athlete. That is the story that would come out. Like it or not, guys, that is exactly what would happen if Dana had this footage and buried it. Had he not turned it over to the DA, the level of corruption that would have been called for amongst our small community would have been at its heights, and quite accurate. Quite accurate, might add, which is why he did turn it over. Had he not used it in the telling of the story, which is also known as the promotion of Khabib versus Conor, it would have been looked at as though he hid it to try to rewrite history and pretend a bad action did not happen. In that regard, it was very appropriate that he told the story, and he told the story accurately. He brings you A to Z on how we got here, not just because Conor changed weights, and not just because he's a huge star and he left the belt behind to fight Floyd and now he's come back and Khabib just happens to be the guy there. All of it. The confrontation with Artem, the confrontation with the bus, is all appropriate in accurate, timely, nonfiction storytelling. If he would have left out any of those parts, he would have been attempting to rewrite history and not tell the story accurately. I think you would all unanimously concede to me on that point. There seems to be a dialogue because at the end of this storm, there is a rainbow with a pot of gold. There seems to be some kind of a resistance because ultimately that video, though a bad action, could turn into something profitable for an organization. Those can't go together when you're attempting to make a decision on a promoter who is promoting. And that term gets lost constantly. That a promoter could come out and lie, that a promoter could come out and embellish, that a promoter would come out with some crazy hair and a weird jacket and start saying silly things just to get in front of the media. What promoting means, and what Scott Coker and Dana White have reminded us week after week and year after year, is that promoting is nothing more than storytelling. Why, who, what, when, and where. But of the who, what, when, and where, I would offer to you the most important in storytelling, in promoting, is the why. The reason I offer to you that that is the most important is because sometimes there isn't an answer. And that's where the hard promotion comes from. That's where the work comes from. Anybody can sell a Ferrari, but a good salesman can sell you a Volvo. Anybody can convince you that the Ferrari is an awesome car. The good salesman has to convince you that the Volvo is an awesome and cool car. It's just different jobs. So what I'm saying to you is that many fights on many weekends, and sometimes all of them, sometimes every fight top to bottom, including the main event, doesn't have a terrific why. And then you're left at your default button, which is because they're both really great fighters. Okay. For a fight fan, for you and I, the folks that listen to this show, for me over here on the microphone, that's enough. That'll work. But don't forget, guys, as passionate as we are about this, we only represent 15% of the marketplace. The revenues that keep this sport alive and the industry alive comes from the casual fan, of which represents 85% of the marketplace. So simply, hey, there's a fight going on, isn't enough. It's just not enough. Often it's what we're left at. So when you have the why are we here and why are we doing this? Another great piece is the belt. The belt not only is great for accomplishment and great for legacy, but it is great for storytelling. People understand when they see a belt. They don't know what's going on, but they see a belt. They get it. Something big is happening here between two very skilled athletes. They can begin to tell themselves do you have the word? The story. That's what promoting is. Anybody can make posters. Anybody can put up billboards. Anybody can get contracts signed between two athletes for a weight class under a set of rules on a specific date at a specific venue. Anybody can get tickets on sale. A promoter can tell you the story. So when you have a situation like this, it does have a very compelling story, and it can go in multiple directions, and that's why this is going to be such a mega fight. It's not just the Conor and the Khabib. It's not just the Ireland and the Russian. In fact, that their nationalities really haven't been played into this whatsoever. Really whatsoever. Have you guys heard it at all? The championship that Conor left, that he was never defeated for. What an incredible line. Never been used. Khabib Nurmagomedov, undefeated. The most successful fighter in MMA against the biggest star in MMA. Nah, that storyline wasn't used. Never been said before till I just said it now. We happen to have not just the what and the when and the who and the where. We happen to have a why. And we happen to have footage of it. You must put those two together. And that's exactly what Dana did. Had he not done that, he would have been accused of trying to protect Conor's image, to protect his own brand. This is a very black eye for the UFC. Dana was very upset about it. He was very upset when John Jones and Daniel Cormier got into it. He was very upset, I can tell you firsthand, when Wanderlei Silva and I got into it on the set of The Ultimate Fighter. I can tell you that one personally, because I personally had to deal with that multiple times. Wouldn't let it go. He would not let it go. But when you have that kind of footage, unless you are cowardly, trying to protect your brand and image, not trying to let people know what happened, trying to protect Wanderlei and I. Wanderlei and I aren't proud to have been in a street fight. I can tell you that much. We're house-trained. We're adults. That was a bad moment for us. But we still made a decision, and we still did it, and it was still caught on video. So unless Dana wants to try to come in and be a sweeper and put this under the rug like most companies would do when there's a bad action, instead he goes, hey, you guys are two grown men. You behave like buffoons, and now you're going to deal with it. Well, that seems right to me. And if you add an element that it added to the ratings, which added to the revenue, that seems to be a part that then people look the other way at. But that is very consistent with how television works. It's very consistent. So I just want to offer you that. I just want to offer you that. You make your own decisions. But I do believe of the two, for myself, I would resent any attempt to rewrite this story. I really would. And much like Wanderlei and I had to deal with the embarrassment of not being able to control our emotions, in this case, Conor's going to have to. Conor was a bad actor. You don't sweep that footage for him. You don't sweep that tape for him. You tell the story. And in the fight business, you let people come out whether they want to support him or go against him. That's up to them. But you tell the story.